Good morning or afternoon, I guess. I don't know when you're watching this. So I'm just going to do a recording, sort of reviewing the things that I went over as far as using the Godot game engine. It is something that I hope that you'll consider using at home, especially if you're fully remote. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, I will do this all correctly and we'll have success. So, if you don't recall, I did ask that you guys uh, go to the website GodotEngine.org. That's where you will find the Godot game engine. So GodotEngine.org. If you just type in Godot Engine, there's a couple different ways to browse to it. Now, depending on who you are, you may uh, have to download a different version than what I'm using. I'm currently using Windows. So I'm going to go Windows Standard Version 64-bit. Down here, you'll notice that it's going to download really fast. The school's internet is working great today. And so all I need to do in order to use this is I need to extract it. So you can see I have the earlier thing that I did, but I'm going to right click, extract all. I am going to browse to a folder and I'm going to choose to put it on my C drive or my hard drive. And I'm going to do a new folder. I'll call it Godot 3.23, which is the version that's currently there. Select it. Um, and then that's where I want it. So I'm going to extract. In order to have some assets, depending on how you probably have an email with all of the assets that you need, but you're going to, mine are saved on a flash drive in a folder. So I'm going to just highlight them all with control. How did I do that? I guess I clicked on one, held down shift, which then selected them all. I'm going to go to copy and I'm going to put those in the same folder that I just created for my Godot installation, which isn't really an installation because it doesn't install. And I'm going to hit paste and now my assets will be there. I did delete my earlier folder. One thing I didn't take the time to do is delete all the previous projects. Um, so you will see some projects when I open it. I'm going to make this easy for myself. So while I'm here, I'm going to right click on the actual app and I'm going to pin it to taskbar and you can see it shows up down here. So that way, when I want to start using Godot, I don't have to search for it on my hard drive. I can just click here to begin that. Now, I am going to start a brand new project. So we go here to new project. I'm going to call it Clown. I'm going to change my folder to the one I just created. So I have to go up a few levels here. So C, and then Godot 3, and there it is. I'll select that folder. Has to be created, and then create and edit. And now Godot is open. Unfortunately, it didn't put my assets in that folder. So let me go to that. The assets are actually out here outside of the folder. So I've got to click, hold down shift, drag those, put those in the folder. I did that kind of a silly way, but I'm not going to bother re-record this. So now inside of Clown are all my assets. You can see that they automatically get transferred here. Hopefully you'll have a smoother experience getting your assets in the right folder. I guess I should have waited until I created the folder for the game. So here we have a 3D window. We're not going to be using that for this game, but I'll be happy to show you another time how to use that. We're actually going to use the 2D feature. I'm going to go to project settings, and I'm going to go down to window and change my size. So 640 by 512 is what we used in class, and that's going to work out just fine for this. It's going to resize my window. While I'm in this view, I do want to be able to see my my grid. So if I enable grid snap here, I think I probably could leave it just like this, but for ease, I am going to configure my snap to be at every 32 pixels. That's going to work really well for what I'm doing. That clearly was not right. What did I do wrong there? Configure snap. I guess it just didn't like how I had this typed in 32, and that looks better. All right, so I don't have any building blocks yet. You can see up here is where I'm going to build my scene tree. My scene tree is going to be made of nodes, and the first node I'm going to use is this one right here, which is just a node 2D, which is just a base node. It doesn't have any real useful features so much as it is just sort of a starting place to put your recipe of a game together. I'm going to rename it by double clicking it and saying game, but not before making a typo, game. All right, so I have my game, not much in it right now. So I'm going to start by building my boundaries of my room. And a great object or a great node for creating an unmoving solid solid block is something called a static body 2D. A static body is really great for platforms or walls or something that your player isn't intended to get through. So a static body is what I'm going to start with. I'm going to call it left wall. But right now you can see it's got this little configuration warning that says it doesn't have any shape. All of your physics bodies or pretty much anything you want to be able to interact with or anything you want to be able to interact with other things in your game needs some sort of collision shape or hitbox, I guess you would call it if you were playing a shooting game. So right now the left wall is a child of game. I need to make a child of left wall. So making sure left wall is selected, I'm going to add a node and I'm going to add a collision shape 2D. Now there are some collision shapes. If you see it in red, typically that's reserved for 3D things. We want to make sure that we're using things that are in purple here or blue. And so collision shape 2D is what I want to add. You can see, oh my gosh, another warning, but that's not a big deal. That's just saying, I've got to move my picture here. That's just saying that we need to define a shape. So because we're going to be doing a wall, a rectangle shape makes a lot of sense. And I remember our textures or our sprites are 64 by 64. So I'm going to increase that. So these are 32 by 32 blocks. So I want to make that twice as big. And then I'm going to drag it up by grabbing this little grabber. I'm going to grab that up. You notice that there's this little purple box. This is the boundaries or edges of our room. Just keep that in mind as we're building this. So my left wall is going to go right there. I'm going to need a right wall. So I'm actually going to make sure left wall is clicked. And I'm going to do Control D, and that's going to give me a second left wall. Well, I don't need two of those. So I'm going to double click, call that right wall, grab it, and move that over. So I have a left and right wall. Now I need a top and bottom. So with game selected, I'm going to add a child node to game. I'm going to add a second static body. I'm going to call this top. And I need to define its shape. So I'm going to add a collision shape to it. Right now, though, my top and my left wall are kind of occupying the same space. So I'm going to select top, come up here to move, and I'm just going to click and hold my left mouse button, and that's going to drag the origin or the placement of my top wall. Go to shape, define it as a rectangle. Now I can go back here to the select mode, and that'll allow me to drag that up one unit to make it 64 tall. And I'm going to drag it across, and then that's a little bit too big, so I got to go down one. And now I have my top wall with top selected. I'm going to go ahead and do Control D, and that's going to give me a second top wall, which I can drag down here and rename bottom. Now, right now I have my scene tree is growing quite a bit. And sometimes a scene tree with too many nodes visible can be a little bit hard to manage. So I'm going to add a child to game. I'm going to add a second node 2D, and I'm just going to call this one boundaries. And I'm going to make these the children of boundaries. And you'll see the benefit of that in just a second. So moving this, so just hovering over. And then I can close boundaries, and now my scene tree becomes a little smaller and a little more manageable. They're still there. They're still going to work just fine, but they're just not taking up all the space in my scene tree um, space here. So selecting game, now I need to give the player some visible uh, evidence or visual information that there's a boundary there. And I'm also going to go ahead add a background. So under game, I could certainly add this. Yeah, I'm going to do it here. I'm going to use something, a new node now called tile map. And a tile map is going to allow me to use tiles or sprites to decorate or fill my space with some information. Similar to Game Maker, we use tile in Game Maker too. So with my tile map selected, currently there is no tile set. So I'm going to say new tile set. When I click on there, it's going to allow me in this box to bring over some sprites that I can use as tiles. So again, I've got to move my picture, which I don't even know if you can see in the video. And I'm going to declare that this is a single tile. And I have to tell Godot how much of this image I want to use. So I've selected this, so I have a grid. I'm going to choose this little rectangle drawer, and that's going to allow me to select all of this that I want to use as a tile. I also want to load my wall as a tile, so I'm going to drag that over. I'm going to say new single tile. My grid is already enabled, so I just have to go here. And now, when I click on my tile map, you can see it gives me both of those tiles to use to paint my room. To paint is super easy. You just click the tile you want, and you can either click once and release to place it, which I'm going to do for my background. And then for my wall, I'm going to select that, click and hold, and you can see as I drag around, it lets me paint really easily. So a tile map is a great, efficient way of putting down surfaces on top of platforms. If you want some of it to look like dirt, if you want some of it to look like grass, similar to Game Maker, tile map is a great way to quickly get visual information into your player. So I have my boundaries, I have my tile map. Now I need the object that my player is going to interact with, and that's the clown. So we used one type of physics body before. We used a static body. Another physics body that Godot has is something called a kinematic. So with game selected, I need the clown to be a child of game. I'm going to type in there it is. Kinematic body 2D. Again, red means three-dimensional. I want to make sure to stay in 2 dimensions here. So I'm going to bring that over. I'm going to double click it, call it clown. The player needs to be able to see the clown. So just like Game Maker, I am going to need a sprite. And a sprite, purple, that means it's for 2D. We can either go here to and say load. Texture, interesting. That's new. So I'm pretty sure I'm looking for a new image texture. And this is silly. I don't know why load's not there. So instead, I'm just going to grab my clown sprite and drop that. Oh, you know what? Silly me. My face was over it. There's load and there's clown. And now my clown is there. You can see by default, the clown centers itself in the room's origin. And that's totally fine. So the sprite is centered on the clown object. So the kinematic body is right here, and the sprite is centered right on it, which is perfectly fine. And the last thing we need for the clown is a collision shape. So as a child of clown, I'm going to go collision shape 2D. And instead of a box, this time I'm going to use the capsule. And you're going to see why in just a moment. However, it's positioned up and down, and I need it to be left to right. So I'm going to go to transform, rotate. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And I'm going to disable snap to grid. That allows me to change the size of my collision box until I am satisfied with my result. So right now, that's close enough for government work right there. I think I mentioned this earlier. Did I? No, I didn't. I mentioned it in class. It's real easy when you try to move an object to select one of its children and move that, which really screws things up. So I don't want that to happen. So with clown selected, I'm going to come up here and choose this option to make sure I cannot choose any of its children. This allows me with confidence to be able to grab my clown and move it into position and not move the collision shape or the sprite, because this being the parent, these two things are going to move with it. When I run my game, there's going to be a couple of things that need to happen first. Number one, I have to save my scene. So I'm going to save scene, and it will ask me, what do I want to save it as? Game sounds good. So I'm going to go ahead and save. But then when I run it, it's going to ask me, what's the main scene? You've never defined that. And we can just go ahead and select game there. So now my game will run. You can see it's not very exciting because my clown doesn't do anything yet. So we use kinematic body 2D for the clown, and there's some really cool things that the kinematic body 2D has as methods that allow us to figure out what kind of surface it's collided with and respond just the way we want. Because GameMaker has the bounce feature, but Godot does not necessarily have something that's going to work the same way. So we need a couple different things. You can see that up here in this space, I'm going to switch to distraction-free mode right here, which allows me to enlarge my my space. I did expect something a little bit different to happen, but this is fine. I'm going to declare some variables up here. The first one is going to be speed, and I'm going to set that to a number. I need a direction, and direction in Godot works a little bit differently. In GameMaker, you can set it to be according to a 360-degree wheel. And in Godot, it asks you for something a little bit different. And I did a little bit of a painting or a diagram in class to sort of go over vector 2. A vector 2 is instruction or information for Godot based on an X and a Y. And an X, if you don't remember from math class, is a position on a graph from left to right. And in games, very exactly the same as a math. When you move to the left on the X axis, you're getting smaller, getting closer to 0, 0, or if you go beyond it, you'd be in the negative numbers. And when you move to the right, you're getting positive. Unlike math class and game engines, when you move down the screen, you actually are going in the positive direction. When you move up, you're going in the negative. That means that if you want to move to the right, for example, you'd be moving in a positive direction on the X, but you wouldn't be moving either up or down. So that's why right is 1, 0. 1 meaning moving in a positive direction, 0 meaning not moving up or down. Versus moving to the left, you'd use a -1 here to indicate that the X is getting smaller, and 0 because you're not moving up or down. You can see from the other positions here, up and down or up is 0 because you're not moving left or right, but you are moving on the negative or moving up. That's why it's a -1 here. If you were moving down, you'd be moving in a positive direction. So you would indicate that with a positive number. Pretty confusing. We should go over that in class. But by default, I want my clown to move right. So I want him to move in a positive number on the X and not up or down. So 0 on the Y. And then for the future, I am going to establish the mouse in variable that we used in class. So I don't really need to do anything in the ready, but if I did, ready is actually similar to the create event. We will use it a lot if we continue to use Godot, but we're not going to use that for our purposes today. Now, you'll also notice that we have a function process. And if I took away that hashtag, that would mean that this was ready to go. You can see the color changes. we're not going to use the process function for what we're doing because process runs as fast as our computer can process. It really literally means as fast as a computer can do things, it's going to work. So because we're using a physics object or a kinematic body, which is a physics object, we're going to use the physics process, and the physics process is actually going to try to imitate or make our things move as realistically as possible. So it's going to slow it down. It's just going to try to work. And our kinematic body isn't going to take full advantage of that, but something that we're going to add later. And we're going to use a built-in method that a kinematic body has, and that's called move and slide. And move and slide, you're going to use a ton if you ever try to program it with using like a platformer or a game similar to Mario Brothers or a game where you're jumping and hopping and landing on surfaces and not being able to go through walls. So we're going to use move and slide because we are programming a kinematic body, and we're going to need two arguments in that move and slide. So we're going to need a linear velocity. So a velocity, if you've paid attention in science, is the combination of direction times speed. That's what velocity is. So velocity equals direction times speed. I'm going to declare it here and use it as a local variable. You could put it as an empty vector2 up here, but just take my word for it. This is fine. Now, there is something weird that happens with direction, that if you have a number that, if say you're, well, I'm going to skip that. It's not helpful for today's discussion. So move and slide, first of all, needs a velocity or linear velocity. It needs to know what direction to move in and how much of that direction to move. And then it also needs, for our purposes, to know what up is. And I'll show you why in a maybe not this lecture, but in another. So vector 2, and if I go back to my painting, up would be 0, -1. 0 is not going left or right, going in a negative direction on the y. So let me put that in here. So 0, -1. So let's see what happens when we run our game. So our clown moves, and you'll notice when he hits a solid object, he does what you'd expect a solid object to do, and that's stop. Now, tomorrow or the next lecture, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how then to program to detect what kind of surface your clown has collided with and to respond accordingly. But today we created a room. We downloaded Godot. We got it started. We created a room. We added a base node, which we use node 2D. We created some boundaries to keep our clown in the room. We used a tile map to give some visual information to a player. And then we used a kinematic body, which is a body that you'll use a lot for platformers and just as the node that generally the player controls, and added some sprite and collision to them. We also added our very first script, which is very simple at this point, but does get our clown moving and doing some things. So that's going to do it for today. Hopefully, if you're following along, I didn't go too fast and I explained things well enough that you're able to start doing some of this work at home. So now I'm going to fumble around, try to find the stop button for my recording, and end the video. So